It's up to you, man. We are live though, so let's go. What's up, Steve? How you doing, man?
David, very good to see you, man. You are always a friendly face that I love to listen to, and you've always got some great stuff. So thank you for having me on your podcast.
Of course, man. Thank you. Thanks for having a great haircut, and I appreciate having you on as well, man. And we're gonna talk about podcasting today. Yeah, if you want to stream, feel free, man. You're welcome to. I know we're going to be doing your podcast after, which is the money. Tell us the name of your podcast again. The money.
The podcast is called Money, Mindset, and Mentoring Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, everything like that. You got it.
Awesome. Good. Well, listen, it's great to have you here. We're both in the Cardone ecosystem, and just lost you. So we just lost the connection with Steve, but here he is. He's back. All right, good. Well, good to have you back, man. I know you just took a little flight to Mars or something, but welcome back, man.
Yay! There we go.
Yeah, so we're both in the 10X ecosystem. That's how we know each other. Talk a little bit about that, and why did you decide to become a 10X business coach?
Well, if I were going to be brutally honest, I didn't decide to become a 10X business coach. In fact, I had known about Grant for quite a period of time, and I wasn't really enamored by Grant and his whole thing because the big jet, the money gun, and all that stuff wasn't really my jam. I'm more I like quiet success, and he really loves the loud success, and it just wasn't my thing. And then, he had this I think it was a business unbreakable challenge, right? And then I saw he had some of these other guests on, so like Russell Brunson and like all these people that I really like, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna join this challenge. And it was like,
you were curious, right? You're like, what's up? You're intrigued by this guy a little bit, right? That's what I'm getting, because I was very similar.
Yeah, and so I went on the challenge, and it was great. Like he teaches this later, so you get to see the man behind the curtains later on, but. It was over giving. I was like, I spent $100 and I get all of this. This is ridiculous. I felt like I was stealing from the man. And then he offers the next thing, which is like this 3-day or 5-day virtual event. I'm like, okay. And now it's like $400 or something like that. I'm like,
the ascension.
Like this thing over here was, I got way more than $100 of value. So then I'm going to jump into the next one because it's clearly going to be more than the 400. Well, it was definitely the case. I got ridiculous value out of that. Then they hit the next one, which was a 10,000 or something like that, to go down and do this event in, I think it was Scottsdale or something like that. And I was like, okay, now I got to talk to my wife about this one.
Yeah, I get it.
And then, I went down and again, it was one of those things where it was a big overgive and I walked away with so much information. I'm one of those guys who, I thought I knew what I thought I knew, which was really good. And then this really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then so signing up to the 10X business coach was, I've been looking at that as part of my business model for a long period of time, but it wasn't something that I was specifically looking into Grant. I was looking into the modeling from, both know that Keller Williams has some great training programs, but it was always real estate focused. And I liked the business focus. I used to do sales consulting and sales training all around the world, but to be able to just jump in and have a whole, deck of everything that you can use to go forward, which was great. But I think even more importantly was the community. Like the fact that you and I are doing this right now it shows a testament to the community that the 10X has. And the 10X business coaches, you're really in the inner circle at that point. But at any week you're talking to Grant, you're talking to Alan, you're talking to Jody, you're talking to Elliot, anybody who's the who's who of the company. Sherry, Jared, you got it. Yeah. And it's crazy. So the access to information is just unbelievable. So did I sign up to I didn't actively choose to do it, but man, the overgive is the reason why I'm there.
It's kind of funny you say that because I during COVID, I met Grant on Clubhouse. And I mean, I knew who he was before that, but I never really engaged with him much. And met him on Clubhouse and literally started off with like a free join our thing for free. And then from the free, you go to, well, there's a $97 VIP. And then from the $97 VIP, I found myself at a $2,000 workshop. And then I went right from the $2,000 workshop to the 25K business, which was a phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, phenomenal. Like you said, So let me ask you this though: how has that helped or has that? I mean, I know you do a lot with podcasting. Same with me, obviously, but has that helped with your podcasting, or maybe it has, maybe it hasn't? Or tell us how, like, how did you build your business around podcasting? Because that's really what you've done, right?
Yeah, 100%. So when we look at number one, before I got into the 10X ecosystem, I didn't have a podcast. So let's just put the story where the story must be. I didn't think in that way. And my first episode of my podcast is something that I really took out of the first thing from Grant, because everybody thinks about Grant about sales, the sales guy, sales, closer survival guide, all that jazz. But where he truly blew my mind was when he's sitting there and like, okay, he's going to, teach us all these sales tricks and sales skills and whatever. And then he goes up in front and says to all of these sales killers, marketing is senior to sales. And you're like, no. And then he walks you through the whole thing. You're like, oh my God, he's right. And so it blew my mind. I'm like, I don't do any marketing. Like I never did any marketing. And I can show you tons of awards for my mortgage brokerage. I can show you tons of awards for Keller Williams, top in the brokerage. So I can show you all of these awards for a business that we did a lot of business, but we did it the hard way. It was grinding out sales with little to no marketing. And so the idea of pivoting around and saying, actually, marketing is senior to sales. That's why I have a podcast today.
Yeah. So talk to us about your podcast. What is the purpose of it? And for people, start there. Like, what is your podcast about, and why should people be tuning into your podcast?
Perfect. So one of the people in Grant's ecosystem is a guy by the name of Pete Vargas. And Pete Vargas does an amazing job of talking about, you're either going to be able to go out and market by networking and that sort of thing, getting on other stages, talking at trade shows or, whatever, talking at other people's podcasts. Or what you can do is you can own the stage. Now, I had run a couple events, and I know the expense of running events, and it's a lot of upfront capital to rent the venue, get the dinners, get the, all that stuff, and put that all together. A podcast venue is really simple. You got a mic, you got a headset, and a pretty good sound. Get some technology, and I can talk about that later, but get some technology that makes it easy to do, and you're up and running, and you've got a podcast. Now, if anybody in the audience is listening, I double dog dare you to go out and just, with a suspension of disbelief, just go out and say, hey guys, to one of the people that you respect, I'm looking at starting my podcast, or I'm working on my podcast, and see the reaction that you get in people's faces. I think the podcast is today's modern Maserati. I mean, Maserati needs to get fixed all the time. It really, it gets you to A and B just like any other car. Sure, it looks pretty slick, but a podcast gets you all this attention, and it gives you that intrinsic value of satisfying an audience, allowing you to collaborate with people like what we're doing today, and allow you to reach out to your clients and build your business. So to me, it's the best marketing tool. It's my Maserati.
Now, listen, I just want to make this point too, because what you said about, and I don't want people to get hung up on technology, because here I am right now on AirPods in my computer, and right over there, I have a stand-up podcast area with a Rodecaster, a $600 microphone, like the whole setup, right? And here I am on my AirPods talking to you. Yep. So we don't have to start there, right? And honestly, I would probably be over there, but I just finished up another a webinar, and I don't even have time to transition. But I promise you, most people listening, they're not even going to notice the difference.
Well, the thing is when you look at the technology side of things, and we're talking about hardscape tech and softscape tech, the hardscape tech is things like the mic, the headset, the pre-filter, all these things, the camera, all these things. My first 5 episodes, I was just like you. Like I had a pretty rudimentary mic in the sense, I know you've got your full setup, but I had a pretty rudimentary mic, and I was recording on Zoom, and that's what I did. My first episode, I think I recorded on Google Meets. Like that's, it wasn't even Zoom that I recorded on. And so, but it was about the guest. Like I was able to build a really rock solid relationship with somebody I already had, but it just solidified that in that moment. And so the idea is it's not necessarily just about the quality of what you're giving to your audience, but it's a quality about the relationship you're building through what you're doing.
Yeah, I love it. So, and that's why I brought it up because I don't want people to get hung up on, oh, I got to go out and I got to spend all this. We have a networking group, and a plumber showed up yesterday, Steve, and he went out. He bought a truck. He had it lettered. He bought all his tools. He doesn't have any jobs, and we asked him to join the group, and he's like, I don't have $300 to invest in the group.
Wow.
I'm like, I think you may have done things. I didn't have the heart to tell him, but you may have done things backwards, right? You may have just joined our group first, went out there and found some clients, then go out there, buy the truck, right. And I think people do the same thing with podcasting. Get
Well,
your podcast going first, right, Steve? Get your 10 episodes together, right?
Absolutely.
So talk to us about guests, though. You mentioned guests.
There's something that you just said that I think you said something that I don't think should be brushed over. It was extremely important. So I want to kind of go back on that and talking about the plumber.
Yeah.
He went out and he bought all the tools. He went out and got the truck detailed. He got all these things done. Now, what happens, and he has no clients, what happens when he doesn't really like the name so much? What happens when he bought the 3-inch hole saw instead of the 4-inch hole saw? What happens when he buys the 10-foot auger rather than the 20-foot auger? The problem is when you build it before it happens, you have the anticipation that you have all the information. But if you're building it while it's happening, or even better, you're finding the clients and then solving their needs, you're operating in the way of you've got actually all the information. So you're actually in a better situation. People think that planning puts you in the right situation. I love Grant's process of massive action. Massive action to me is the idea that you're going to be building it. When they show up, you're building it. Like one of his books he wrote, it was the idea that he's pre-sold all the books, then he wrote it. One of his books here is he wrote this book that everybody knows, which is called, this is an interesting one. He wrote a book called Sell or Be Sold.
Yeah, sorry. I have mine with arm reach too. Look at that.
That's right. He wrote this book, but a lot of people don't know this is actually that book. So this was his first iteration, which is the Sell to Survive. And so it's almost exactly the same content, but it has all these spelling errors. It has all the grammatical errors. It has a lot of errors in this book. And this is a coveted book for me because it says that, if you have massive imperfect action, it can lead to absolutely amazing results. Because we all know with this book, you can flip to any page and there's going to be some value on it. It drips off every page, as we hear, quite often. But the idea is the massive action is what takes you to getting there. And yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but I'd rather make mistakes in action than making mistakes in planning and not seeing anything in result.
Let's talk about guesting because we both have guesting podcasts. I've only done I'm at 372 episodes. I think I've done 5 episodes where I didn't have a guest. It's just my style. I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
You're also guesting, right? Talk about your guests. How do you get guests? Why are the guests important? Let's answer some of those questions for listening.
Yeah, I think your selection of the guest is what's really going to help you define, how you're going to monetize on your podcast. I was just down at PodFest in Orlando. It was a few weeks ago. It's run by this guy named Chris. It's an amazing community. There's about 2,200 podcasts who are there. So if you're a podcaster, you're thinking about anything, shameless plug for PodFest. Get yourself there. It's amazing. Now, there's a lot of people who are there who are very passionate about the craft of podcasting. And so they, 400, 500, 600 episodes in, but they look tired. They look worn. And so the challenge for them is that they have no idea how to make money doing it. So they're taking money from all their money-making events, whether it's their job, whether it's their business, and they're dumping it into this podcast that's not a revenue tool. And so my suggestion is if you're looking at starting a podcast, know your intentions and know what you're looking at doing. So set a strategy as you're doing it. Am I starting this podcast to make money, or am I starting this podcast because I'm passionate about some specific content? Now, if you're looking at making money, that's the reason why I started the podcast. So I want to be very clear about that. So it wasn't, I run a business. And so my business needs to grow, and I'm using my podcast as a vehicle to grow my business. Now, I can tell you today, David, that my podcast is my number one lead source for everything. It's bigger than my it's bigger than my Instagram. It's bigger than my, cold calls. It's bigger than my, cold emails or any of these other tactics that people use. Podcasting is my number one thing. And the reason being is number one is because of guesting. So guesting to me is the most important thing if you want to have success in your podcast. And the reason being is because most people, when they build a podcast, they're looking at the audience. But let's be straight here, David. When I started my YouTube channel, I probably had 1 follower, maybe 2 followers, maybe 12 followers, probably even still somewhere around there, under 10,000, right, for my YouTube channel. But the people who do follow are the people that I care about following it. So they're my high impact clients, follow my YouTube channel. That's all that matters to me at this point. So a lot of people look at the large audience and they're like, I want to create this big audience. I want to get monetization. I want to get sponsors and all these other things. Well, that can come in due time. You need the fuel to keep that engine going. And that's what guesting does. So, and how does it do that? Well, you and I both know, David, that we can have a communication. We can bring somebody onto the podcast that we might never speak to on a one-to-one basis otherwise. So if we said, hey, I want to meet with you and I want to talk about a business opportunity together, you'd be like, yeah, that sounds really interesting. But if I say, hey, do you want to come get on my podcast? And I'd love to just talk a lot about what you're doing. Most business people are going to say, heck yeah, that would be amazing. And if you look at the list of people that have been on your podcast, those are people who are using your podcast as a stepping stone to get into your audiences and get their message out, which that's the value of the guesting side. The hosting side is that they're coming in and you can have an arrangement. Out of that, the guest coming on, there's a lot of collaboration opportunities. There's a lot of guests that come on my show and we start talking. We're like, man, let's do this together. Let's do this together. Let's do this together. And there's just so many things because you build a bond with your guest. It's a wonderful experience. So the guest in that moment, it allows you to be able to fuel the mid game, which is reaching the audience of the people that most matter to you. And then the long game, which is reaching the audience that you don't know yet.
Yeah. Two things I really took from that. Number one is you don't need a huge audience. You need the right audience. I promise you, man. I did a webinar and there were only 15 people that showed up and I almost canceled the webinar, but I didn't. And because I was discouraged because I'm like, I had 100 and something people sign up, 15 showed up. But then one of the people from the webinar ended up being my highest. I think we did 90,000 in business together over 3 months.
It's amazing.
So from a 15-person webinar, right? And then the second thing is, and I joke around with this, Steve, but I've had some tremendous guests. I've had Gary Vee, I've had Mel Robbins, Grant's been on twice. I feel like it's free coaching. Like I get to get coached by these people. I kind of joke around, but in a lot of ways I don't. I had Daryl Eves. Daryl Eves wrote the book, The YouTube Secrets, right? I had him on my podcast because I'm like, how do I get better at YouTube? I reach out to Daryl. Next thing you know, he's on my podcast. He's coaching me and my audience on YouTube. So there's that part of it too, right?
It's amazing. You talk about someone like Mel Robbins. I was down at the Keller Williams family reunion just like 2 weeks ago. And she's sitting there talking in front of 18,000 people. And when she's on your podcast, she's talking to one person. That is super exciting.
Yeah, she was amazing. She was, I'll tell you this, the takeaway I got from her, I still use every day of my life, is, she just said, never hit the snooze button on your alarm clock, ever. She said, set it for whatever time. The reason she said, and I'll tell you what, it's always stuck with me. She said, because the night before, when you set your alarm clock, that's setting the goal for the next day. And she said, if you hit the snooze button, basically what you're doing is you're giving up on your goals for the whole day before you even got out of bed. And I just always remember her saying that to me. And it's on my podcast.
And it counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right?
Stuck with me. Yeah, exactly. The 5-second rule. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So guesting. So people that are starting now, let's say somebody's listening, Steve, they don't have a podcast yet. They're like, this stuff sounds pretty good. Where should they start?
So the first thing is in my opinion, is find somebody that you can align with, who's going to help you support your goals of getting onto a podcast. Because what they're going to do is they're going to find all the pitfalls that you're going to fall into naturally. Like I fell into all the pitfalls when I started my podcast. I signed it for everything. I did all these things. And I was just sort of lost in trying to put things together. And I was frustrated. And so the first thing is to find somebody who can coach you through those things. That's number one. After you do that, then what you can do is then you say, okay, what is my podcast going to be about? Now, personally, I love aligning it to an audience that's my perfect client's audience. Because if it's aligned to my perfect client's audience, guess who I'm going to attract to come onto my podcast? My perfect client, right?
Yeah.
And it might be my perfect business partner. It might be, as Russell Brunson calls, my dream 100. Like, you brought on your dream 100. Like, my God, like, you brought on all amazing people onto your podcast. That's huge in elevation. That's amazing. But what you did is your podcast was about something that they wanted to talk about, or they wanted to impart wisdom around. And so that's super exciting. So orient your podcast around the outcomes that you're looking for. Then what you're going to do is you're going to look at it and say, I just need to get things started. I typically tell people, record a 5-minute discussion, just about anything. Just get used to talking on a mic. So get a mic or get a camera, get something, record something for 5 minutes. That gets a comfort zone. It starts building the reps. Like, when you started running your marathons, you didn't run a marathon the very first day, right? You took some time to be able to start getting into that mechanism. And
I also hired a coach.
Hired a coach. Exactly. And that's why we said that's the first thing. Yeah, you hire the coach first. And then the second thing is then you start getting into the rhythm of doing things. Then record a 15-minute session. And then after you record a 15-minute session, you kind of got a little bit of a rhythm. So you got some comfort, right? Then what you do is your coach is going to help you identify, here's what you need to do from a technology standpoint, because there is a tech stack that's required. It's a very small one. I use a software called podcastai.com. And what podcastai.com does is it handles all the transcriptions. It handles all the show notes. It handles all the send out to Apple and Spotify and all that jazz. It does all the clippings. By mid this week, it's going to do all of the shorts. So I can use my podcast to feed all my shorts now, very simply, right in through podcastai.com. And so, having a technology stack like that is super helpful. And then it's saying, where do I find the guests? Right. So that's the big one. People then go, okay, I've got that. Now I got to start looking at the guests. And we can hit on that in a moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so first step, find somebody that's going to help you, right? It's called compressing time.
Yeah.
Right. Shortcutting. Second one is you need to determine, what is my podcast about? Who is my guest? Who's my audience? Be focused. And then, get the right systems. Now, again, I personally think you can get away with a good computer. Like, I have a really, really good MacBook M4 with a good set, good camera. But I also have a phenomenal setup over there. But again, you don't need to go crazy. I think you just got to start somewhere and work. Don't be like the plumber now that's got, $40,000 in debt and no customers, right? To start his business.
Yep.
I think that's what I would say. So as far as, when it comes to the guests, do you suggest, like I tell people, typically you should have a certain amount of interviews completed before you launch, or do you feel like that's important, or what are your thoughts on that?
I spin it a little bit differently. And what I think is really important is when you're looking at launching your podcast, again, the intentionality about what you're looking at doing with the guesting specifically, I think is extremely important. So if my goal is to build a relationship with the person that I would love to have on my show, I definitely want to build that relationship before it's on the show. And by that, I mean having a pre-interview before you start recording, I think is instrumental to success of being able to build your business. Because let's face it, if you talk to somebody who is before your show and you can set up a business relationship with them, say there's a collaboration opportunity, say there's some sort of thing that you can cycle together, that's huge. You can build a strategy together. And so by having that original discussion, that's going to help you be able to, number one, produce way better content. And number two, what that's going to help you to do is be able to create a better relationship with that person. Because again, if your short-term fuel is the relationship with the guest that you're bringing on, don't shortchange that. Always have the pre-interview.
So for me, I haven't, for a while I had sponsors. I don't anymore. I've never made a lot of money off sponsors. I was making $2,500 a month. Nothing major, but certainly covers the production costs and all that. But most of my opportunities have come from either connections, like you just said, relationships with the guests, or listeners reach out to me. So how have you been able to monetize? Because I know you've got multiple $1 million businesses. How have you been able to monetize the podcast?
Well, number one is my favorite sponsor is a business that I own. And so the idea is it's either a business that's a client of mine or it's a business that I own. So if I could drop the name of my mortgage business, Real Approved. So if you're getting a mortgage in Canada, go to realapproved.ca. That right there, that's feeding into a business that I know I can monetize out of it. Right. If I say, for example, I want to get some coaching. I'm a real estate agent and I'm in the States and I need somebody who's got lots of experience. I'd say you got to talk to David Hill. Because the guy's number one, he's been one of the top trainers in the world in real estate. Get on board with him, right? And so that would
Thank
be
you.
you.
By the way,
it's the truth, man. It's the truth. We've gone through so many conversations about coaching that I don't say things that are not truthful. I say things that I believe to be true. And the respect that you have from the area where you came from, it's still there.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, man. It seems like we may have, there you go. Your connection might have froze up a little bit.
There we go. Yeah. So, the people down in Keller Williams, they still know you. They still have a high degree of respect for you. And that matters because those are the opinions of people who matter about somebody who matters. And so I think that's huge. And then the impact you make in the 10X community, that's second to none. I mean, anytime you get a call, people are like, there's David. Now Grant might chastise you about being so nice so many times, but that means he knows you, right? That means you've made an impact.
That's funny. Well, what do you think about that? I mean, I don't want to make this about me, but I still, I still don't get it. Like
you're the nicest guy on the planet. Like literally, you are the nicest guy on the planet. You're the guy you would take that sweater off and you give it to the person next to you if you needed it. So 100%, you put everybody else first, and there's nothing. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that. What I think what Grant was probably getting at is sometimes you got to put the niceties aside to help somebody get over, get through making a decision. Because I heard this said otherwise, but I think Grant resonates on this, is that sales isn't about convincing somebody to do something. Sales is about persuasion. And what persuasion is, they already know what they need to do. Like you're not teaching them something that they don't already know. Maybe you teach them a little bit, but they know the outcome that they're looking for. You're just helping them go across that painful decision process because change is painful. So you're helping them overcome that pain. And sometimes when we're too nice, we allow them to have those concessions of complacency rather than action.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not too nice. And I told Grant, no, that's going to be my new talk. No more.
I'm not nice.
Guy. No more my new talk.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
All right, but listen. In wrapping up, what else do we need? What have I missed when it comes to the podcasting conversation that we should be talking about?
I think that there's a lot of people who run into imposter syndrome when they're doing a podcast. So they think, I've got my first episode, nobody wants to listen to it. I got my second episode, nobody wants to be on it. Know this, that when you have a podcast, you are in the top 1% of the population. And if you think podcasting is going away, look what's happening on with YouTube. Look what's happening soon with Instagram. Everybody's jumping on podcasting. Tony Robbins said podcasting is one of the number one things. Grant Cardone, look what he's doing on podcasting. Look what Gary Keller is doing on podcasting. Everybody is pushing podcasting. So my suggestion is do not have that imposter syndrome. Know that you can get your message out. But more importantly, it's going to help you set up with some amazing relationships.
I want to open it up too. I know we got about 20 plus people on here right now listening in. So if you have a question, drop your question in the chat. If you want, or even raise your hand. And if you want, drop in the chat. We'll bring you into the conversation. I love doing this. Normally I stream on Clubhouse, but I didn't even have time to set that up today, Steve.
It's all good.
Yeah, love to get you guys in. If anybody has a question in the chat, I'll keep my eyes on the chat. So, Steve, what would be the one? And I love what you said too. Let me just go back to this for a minute because it's really, really important. Sometimes we just got to get out of our own heads, and right in that whole, what did you call it? Not like the inferiority thing. What did you call it?
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I can't even say that. It's like it drives me crazy. but people, right? Like I can relate to it because it was me 10 years ago. right? Still have my childhood that I was dragging around with me, but the reality is, how does somebody like get because it's important, because what's going to happen is you're going to release your first 10 episodes and you're going to be like, wow, I got 14 downloads. Like, this is not going too great, right? And then you're going to say, oh, and the 14 downloads, it's my mom, my cousin, and Steve, Hamoen listening, right? And but there's going to be the time where you're going to be like, this isn't working. But that's where the imposter syndrome is going to kick in, right? And you got to keep moving forward. How does somebody move forward at that point?
I think what you do is you focus on the long range as well as the short range. And the short range is what I'm saying is you're building up the skill set to be able to communicate effectively. Like, you're understanding how to throw out a hook. You're understanding how to draw in an audience. You start learning these things as when you start to try to create little nuggets, because you're going to start thinking about shorts, and you're going to say, how am I going to talk in a way that's going to create more impactful shorts? And so your modicum of communication starts to improve. Mark that as your win. Don't say I don't have 1,000 downloads or 10,000 downloads, because that's just unrealistic in your first 10 episodes. I mean, maybe you'll get it, who knows? But if you don't, and that should be okay, because you're building the systems for success. The second thing is the relationships that you're developing, focusing on those and saying, you know what, I just had an amazing conversation. Why diminish that? Like, I love when Sherry from Grant Cardone's office, she says this. She says the only emotion allowed in the audience, or sorry, in the office, is celebration. And that's at Grant's office. And I love that. Yeah. No negativity allowed. So in your heart, no negativity allowed. In your actions, no negativity allowed. And you're going to keep on seeing success, because you're going to count those wins as they go.
Yeah, 100%. We just got to, as Grant teaches us, got to keep showing up, man. That's it. Keep showing up, even without the downloads. I remember, if you go back to my episode 103 with Gary V, these are his words. He said, I showed up every day for 2 years and no one gave a shit. Those are his exact words. Go listen to it. Path to Mastery episode 103. And he said, but I just kept showing up. And then all of a sudden, people started to care. And that's literally, that's the grind that a lot of us have to go through. And we got to stop making it about ourselves. And we got to start making it about the people that we're serving and helping. And that's how we're gonna continue moving forward, when you're not getting downloads and nobody knows who you are and blah, blah, blah. And if you go back, my first 100 episodes, my first episode is super embarrassing. Don't even listen to that. But my
that means go listen to it, by the way.
But don't even bother. But even probably my first 100, right? And now I feel like, okay, I'm getting a little better. Probably I can still do better. But it's just, we all just keep showing up, Steve, right? We show up, we get better. So give us the final thoughts for people that listened in here, and then tell them how they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you're up to. Absolutely.
And I just want to resonate exactly what you're saying. And if you're at 1% better every day, think what you can do in 30 days. That's 30% better. I mean, that is just preposterous. If you saw a stock and you could make 30% in 30 days, you'd be like, game on. That is a really and but that's something to really think about as you're looking at progression. So look at the progression as you go. Like David, my first podcast, absolutely appalling. I didn't even know the name of my show. It was just action happening. So, get into action, get into gear, get into things happening, and look at the relationships you will develop. It's going to be magic for you. To get a hold of me, the easiest way to get a hold of me is my name, stevehamoen.com/book. And that's how you could get onto my podcast if you want to start your journey into podcasting. That is a big thing. For me, is just to reach out and we can get things going. If you want good tech, podcastai.com. That's the easy one. There's a question in the chat there.
So, I see that. Awesome. So for me, in the beginning, I'll tell you what, it was probably my biggest mistake, but I did everything myself for a couple months. Now I do nothing. The only thing I do is this. Everything else is handled. But you can find people on Fiverr. Steve, I know you have some systems too as well. I used to do a lot on Fiverr, and we build our own stuff as well on high level. But what would you say to that question?
I think it all depends on the type of podcast that you're doing. I mean, we have technology that using AI can create thumbnails. And so you click a button, it reads your show, it says what's your show about, and then it creates a thumbnail to match it. But if you have a brand that you're trying to create consistent, I think having somebody who has a good brand strategy is going to be really important to bring that. But again, at the beginning, it's not about the idea of the podcast itself. It's the idea about building the skills for yourself and then building the relationships with people. Focus on those things first. Everything else is going to come in due time. I mean, I was 10 episodes in. My podcast used to be called the OP3M podcast. And then 10 episodes, I was like, I don't like that. And I switched it to the Money Mindset Mentoring podcast. And so it just quick little shift, just like sell to survive became sell or be sold. And so, that to me is something that is key. And by the way, Shubham, that AI will never replace people. What AI is going to do is challenge people to skill up, right? And so using AI technology, you probably use it in a lot of things that you're doing. But if we use it as a tool set to skill up, there's so many people who are VAs who are worried about this. There's so many people in the creative space that are worried about AI. Use AI as a really good employee. Use AI as a really good tool. But the tool will never replace the person.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you. Thank you for the question, by the way. And Steve, appreciate you and your time. And thank you. And I'm looking forward to being on your show as well. And you just reminded me, I was trying to think of what the name of my podcast when I first, and I can't even remember. It wasn't called Path to Mastery. That's all I know. I don't remember what it was called. But anyway, man, appreciated you being here. It was fun. Good to get to know you a little bit better. And
likewise.
And again, one more time, if you want to get in touch with you, give us what's your handle.
Yeah, just go to stevehamoen.com/book or to podcastai.com. Either of those two will lead to me, and look forward to chatting with you guys about your journey.
Beautiful. Thank you, man.
Thank you.